Good afternoon. How's everybody? Trish, actually, it's funny that you say friends, because I was telling somebody yesterday how I love my job. It's been a gift through tragedy, but I feel like I have friends where I fly, and I say I have friends in Reno now that I need to go visit. So anyway, I feel the same way. Thanks so much for being here. It's really my honor to be here speaking with you this morning, this afternoon, and I want to express my sincere and heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you. As educators, you are superheroes, and you really are. You have the most important job in the entire world, and I'm speaking to you as a parent who gives their most precious asset to you and asks them to shape and mold them into the human beings that they're going to become. There is no more important job. You all have the capability of transforming and saving lives on a daily basis. There is no more important job in the entire world, so I want to express my gratitude to you for that. Thank you so much for everything that you do on a daily basis. I'm going to play a short introductory video, and then I'm going to be back. And it's different from what you all saw in my workshops. Love those moves. Awesome, Jess. It is August 24th, 2012, and Jess has brand new soccer shoes. So prior to 12/14/2012, I was a single mom with 2 boys. It was kind of an unremarkable life. It was such a great life. I just wanted to be a mom, and I just wanted to be with my kids. Run the ball up to me. One day, you're a mom with 2 boys, 1 boy riding in a car seat in the back seat. So one morning, I'm holding hands with my 6-year-old in his car seat, and the next thing that I know, cut! There is no 6-year-old. He's been murdered. So I had come home for the first time, and I was getting Jesse's clothes for the funeral, and I walked through the kitchen on my way out, and I noticed these 3 words that Jesse had written on the kitchen chalkboard shortly before he died. He wrote, "Nurturing, healing, love." These words were a message of comfort for his family and friends, and inspiration for the world. It's where we needed to turn, and I knew I'd be spending the rest of my life spreading this message. I didn't have to create a solution. There was one available, and it's called social emotional learning. And social emotional learning proactively prevents violence. I believe that Jesse is a part of this organization. I actually believe that he's leading it, and all I have to do is just be present. I live with a tremendous dichotomy in my life every single day. It's never out of my mind why I am leading a worldwide movement to choose love. It's because my 6-year-old son was shot in his 1st grade classroom alongside 19 of his classmates in one of the worst mass murders in U.S. history. I feel like I meet Jessie a lot in schools. I'll look into a child's eyes and I'll see Jessie looking back at me. And how blessed am I? And how grateful I am that my purpose is spreading a message of choosing love, and given to me by my 6-year-old son. So shortly after that incident, I realized that I wanted to be part of the solution, and I started researching what that was. And as I said in the video, was heartened to find that there is a solution, and it's called social emotional learning, and I've dedicated my life to making sure that every child has access. That's how important I believe it is. I believe that it would have saved Jessie's life. And I love this quote: people must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. And that is a Nelson Mandela quote. The whole movement to choose love started at Jessie's funeral. When I got up to speak, I said, everybody's been asking what they can do for us, for our community, for us as parents. I said, there is something that you can do. The whole tragedy started with an angry thought in Adam Lanza's head. Adam Lanza was the former Sandy Hook student that perpetrated the crime. Because everything starts with a thought in our head. And research shows us that we have, all of us in here, on average, 50,000 thoughts a day. And research also shows us that the majority of our thoughts are negative and repetitive. That means around 70 to 80% of the total thoughts that you think on a daily basis are negative. That means angry, non-productive, and don't serve you. Over 90% of your thoughts are repetitive. The same thought you had yesterday, the day before, a year before, 5 years before. So when you know that every thought that you have impacts you on a cellular level, that means physically, mentally, and emotionally shapes your reality. It makes you really want to be mindful of what you put through your head. And the amazing thing about this is that an angry thought can be changed, right? And that means that this whole tragedy could have been changed anywhere along the way. So I asked everyone on that day to start thinking about what you think about. You're asking what you can do, here's something you can do. Start thinking about what you think about and change one angry thought a day into a loving thought. Only one. I said by doing that, you will make this a safer, more peaceful and loving world. And about a week later, I started getting feedback from all around the country. Emails, texts, calls. That one simple act had completely changed people's lives. And I knew that I was onto something. And of course, those of you in the mental health field, you know that this is simply the cognitive triangle. I haven't made anything up here. Our thoughts impact our feelings, which then impact our behavior. It's called the cognitive triangle. Everything happens. Everything starts with a thought. And I'm talking about mindfulness, something that you've heard of before, which is really focused awareness. It's being present. Bottom line is, for life, the foundation of our program that I was here to talk about, the Choose Love Enrichment Program, is that we can't always choose what happens in our life. That's the truth of it. Our kids, ourselves, I would never choose what happened to my child. You can't always choose what happens to you, but you can always choose how you respond. You can always choose how you respond, thoughtfully respond, and you can always choose love in your response. That's when you take your personal power back. Somebody might come in and start to write the chapter for you, but you can finish it by how you respond. And you can always choose love in your response. So when I decided I wanted to be part of the solution, I was looking at what the issues were. And we have a lot of issues, and they've been around for a while. It's not just violence in schools, which, by the way, when I started doing this 5 years ago, I would say, this can't be our new normal. Schools must be a safe haven for our educators and our students. They have to be. Well, now I'm saying, okay, this is our new normal, because we have one school-related shooting incident, so that means that a gun is discharged on school property once a week in our country since Sandy Hook Elementary. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. It happens once a week. It is our new normal. I'm still saying, it can't be our new normal. Schools have to be safe havens for both our educators, our hero, superhero educators, and our students. But not only is violence an issue today, so is mental illness. We have a mental health epidemic happening in our country, where 49.5% of our U.S. youth will have had a diagnosable mental illness by the time they're 18. That statistic jumps to 60% by the time they're 21. The majority of that diagnosis is anxiety. The average onset age for anxiety in our country is 6 years old. And we know that the majority of those kids, around 70%, will not get professional help. So that means that they struggle themselves. They suffer alone. Interesting, when you look at the long-term outcomes of untreated anxiety, they're exactly what we're seeing in our society. Violence, mental health issues, substance abuse, incarceration, depression, suicide. Trauma in our schools has increased. So 20 years ago, there was the ACEs study, if you guys remember that. It was groundbreaking research on childhood trauma. 20 years ago, that's adverse childhood experiences. The ACEs study found that 1 in 5 kids was coming to school traumatized. Today, it's over 50% of kids are coming to school having experienced a recent traumatic event. Bullying has increased in our schools. So and this, by the way, is despite state-mandated anti-bullying programs and laws that every child has to go through. Bullying has actually increased by 21% since we started tracking it in 2003. These are cited. I know you guys are aware of the issues, but probably not the level. We have more suicides in the U.S. than murders. Substance abuse is skyrocketing. Last year, we had about 60,000 deaths from overdoses, and that number is expected to escalate for the next 5 years. That's more people than ever before have died from drugs, more people for the first time ever than cars and guns. So right about now, you're like, what? This is our wrap-up speaker? I wanted to go home on an SEL high, not a low. But I wouldn't be talking about this if I didn't have a solution, right? I would not be bringing this up. Why though? Let's talk about why. Like, those issues aren't new. We've had those issues for a long time. And it's not like we don't want to get rid of them. It's not like people aren't out there and their full-time jobs across the country are to stop that. So why do they keep getting worse? What is going on? We're all human beings. Nobody wants to see suffering like that. I don't care what political party you're from. We all want that to stop. How come it keeps getting worse? Well, we have a negative bias in our society. That means that we focus on the negative. And why do we do that? We do that because that's how we've passed down our genes. So for instance, think about caveman times, or cave woman, since I'm a woman and I'm giving the example. So you see one cave woman sitting outside of a cave, and she's totally zenned out, meditating, mindful, eyes closed, right? Then the other cave woman is over here scanning for a saber-toothed tiger. Who's going to live to pass down their genes? The scanner, right. If you ask little kids, they go, the meditator. But we know it's the scanner, right? And we still have some of that scanning mentality that we have built in within us to keep us safe, and we use it. And a lot of some of the programming, non-academic programming that we have in our schools is built on this negative bias. What? We have a problem? Let's focus on it. Let's build laws around it. Let's make sure everybody knows how to define it, right? But what happens when we focus on something? It gets bigger. It grows. And by the way, that's what we've seen happen. So here's another, so this is an interesting crowd to ask this question to, but it doesn't matter who I'm speaking to. Who here has never heard of PTSD? You've never heard of PTSD? You've never heard of PTSD? Post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, wow, that's awesome. So we have okay, well, that's good. It's really good because we're going to shape and mold you just from right now. It's good. But everybody else has heard of it. And it's interesting when you look at the research behind PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, 7% of the total population will suffer from PTSD at one point in their life. Okay? But we all know about it. You guys know about it because of your kids, but it doesn't matter what audience I talk to. It's always the same. Everybody's heard of it, right? Why? Because we're going, what? PTSD? Oh, what is that? Post-traumatic stress disorder? That's something that might harm me? Let me find out about that. Let me write it down on an index card, file it in my brain, so that if I ever am encountering it, I can pull it out and I can help myself, right? And by the way, when I was waiting at the firehouse to see if Jesse was going to be okay, what was my first thought? Oh my God, if this does not turn out okay, I am going to suffer from PTSD. And how is that going to manifest in my life? You know how we think? Fear, fear, fear. Well, I'll probably be institutionalized, and who's going to take care of my surviving son? Well, here's why we, an example of our negative bias. Who here has heard of PTG? Post-traumatic growth. From me? Oh, that doesn't count. But you remembered, that was really good. Okay, no one? Live and learn? Maybe. Yeah. Yes, to an extent. Post-traumatic growth is something that the vast majority of us experience. It is researched. You can Google it. And it's got research just like PTSD, except post-traumatic growth is when we grow through trauma, when we find strength we never knew we had, when we gain a new perspective, when we deepen our spirituality, when we find meaning in our suffering, when we strengthen relationships, weed out weak ones, find a purpose in our life. There's so many ways to grow through trauma. In fact, when you think about how we grow as human beings, do we grow through being at birthday parties with all of our favorite people around us and getting all the presents we want? Does that shape and mold us? No way. It is difficulty, it's obstacles, it's pain and suffering. And by the way, if your life has been perfect up until now, I have something to tell you. You're going to face obstacles. You're going to have some pain in your life. And by the way, that's an opportunity for growth. There are going to be lessons in there for you. Think about kids. Think about a whole generation that had that seed planted, the seed of PTG planted in their head. It's not hard to do. It's just providing the awareness that you can grow through trauma, that it's really not something to fear. When we fear something, we resist and avoid it. But when we understand something, we can turn to it with almost curiosity and say, doesn't take away the pain and suffering. Pain and suffering are there to shape and mold us. But it does take away the fear, and you can even ask, what are the lessons in here for me? How am I going to grow through this? I love this quote by Helen Keller. Character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experiences of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, vision cleared, ambition inspired, and success achieved. So the closest I got to being like clinically depressed following my son's murder was actually not until 5 years later. So I always practice being present. Those in my workshops heard about that. And so we didn't have a TV. We still don't have a TV. But obviously I watched TV after Sandy Hook, and I listened to all the discussion that was going on. And then I really didn't watch it again until I was at my mom's, and we turned on the TV after Parkland, the shooting in the Florida high school. And I turned on the TV, and it was mind-blowing to me, because remember, I hadn't watched it. Everyone was talking about the same exact thing. 5 years later, no action. And then the kids get up, and the kids are like, oh, nobody's going to do anything to protect us, so we're going to take matters into our own hands, and we're going to have to do this ourselves. I felt shame. Even though I spend 24 hours a day, literally in my sleep too, trying to be part of the solution, I felt shame. And I actually asked my therapist, what the heck is going on? We're having the same conversation 5 years later with no action. I don't understand this. And he walked me through a little experiment. I walked your administrators through it yesterday. I've done this with Trump's senior domestic policy advisors, and I want to do it with you today. And it really helped me. It really explained a lot of things. So I want you to do this with me, please. You can either use a pen and a piece of paper, or you can just do it in your head. I want you to think about a problem that you're currently having. It can be anything, just off the top of your head. Raise your hand if you don't have a problem, and I have a long list of my own, and I will loan you one. But I won't take it back. So just think of a problem that you're currently having. You got your problem? Does everybody have their problem? Yeah? Okay. Now I want you to either write down or mentally list 3 to 5 thoughts and feelings about that problem. Just off the top of your head. Do it, because it's pretty cool. 3 to 5 thoughts and feelings about your problem that you're having, just off the top of your head. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, you got your thoughts and feelings? You got them? You got your thoughts and feelings? Okay. Now, I want you to take either your pen or your mental pen, and I want you to circle the thoughts and feelings that are about a solution. So interesting, right? I'm seeing smiles, I'm seeing little laughs. None of them, right? None of them. Interesting. Interesting that we don't think solution-oriented, isn't it? That helped explain why people are talking on and on. No one's talking about the cause of that list of issues that I talked about, even school shootings. No one's talking about the cause. No one's talking about the solution. They're talking about the effects. And they happen to be political agendas on both sides. So interesting, right? We have to start thinking about the solutions if we want to solve it. We need to focus on the solutions, and it's not exactly how we're used to thinking. So I always ask, all that big list, and they've been around for so long and they keep growing, who's going to fix it? And I really think after Sandy Hook, I think the collective we thought, oh my God, that's horrible. Thank God that doesn't ever happen to me. You know, those things happen to other people. Thank God I somehow make different choices. I don't get in those kinds of situations. But they, you know, they with the capital T, those people that take care of issues in our society, make laws, whoever they are, they're going to take care of this, because this can't go on. Obviously, somebody's going to do something. We can't live in a society where this happens. This can't happen in a civilized society. They're going to take care of it. They with the capital T. I was actually here at the Dorothy Lemelson Elementary School, and we had a parent community night. And I had this slide up. I said, who's going to fix it? And this was a parent night. And one of the dads, I think he was being kind of smart alecky or kind of funny, whatever. He goes, Mary Poppins. And I said, you know what? That's a really good point. Because there is no Mary Poppins with her little umbrella that comes down to fix everything and then she leaves. There is no Mary Poppins. And by the way, there is no they with the capital T either. Because guess what? 5 years later, it's still happening. And it's going to continue to happen because nothing's changed. So who's going to fix this? We are. We all have to take responsibility for what's happening to our kids in our society. And I'm preaching to the choir right now because you guys are. You guys are already implementing social emotional learning. But we all are going to have to be part of the solution in order for this to stop. We have to take responsibility. So the solution, social emotional learning. So the cause of what we're seeing, and this is across the board on all those issues, by the way, is anger, isolation, disconnection, lack of resilience, lack of the ability to manage emotions, lack of conflict resolution abilities. The solution is teaching kids how to have healthy and positive relationships, how to deeply connect, skills and tools for resilience, how to manage their emotions. By the way, there's no mass murderer gene. So and people come up to me and they go, oh God, that guy Adam Lanza, he just snapped, right? And I say, guess what? There's never a snap. We like to think it's a snap because if people just snap, what can we do? What can we do to prevent it? Nothing, right? But it's never, ever, ever a snap. It's always a long, slow, steady lifetime of neglect and pain and suffering and anger and disconnection, lack of resilience, lack of ability to manage emotions that leads to someone that comes in and does a school shooting or abuses substances or has the majority of mental illness. It is always that trajectory, always. So social emotional learning, this is interesting, is the #1 way to have a safe school. Now I've been saying this for 5 years, but I haven't wanted to harp on it because when people look at me, they think about school safety and sometimes people go, oh, I was too afraid to even listen to you and this type of stuff. So I didn't want to scare anybody away. But guess what? Social emotional learning is the #1 way to have a safe school. A lot of people are anxious about that, right? Because our environment has changed. #1 way. What do I mean by that? But what do you mean? Because you got to lock doors and you have the bulletproof film and you've got single point entries and you've got cameras and all those external safety measures. Very important. Very important. Right? But none of those are going to prevent a student from wanting to come in and harm an educator, who is the usual target, or another student. The only thing that proactively prevents that is social emotional learning. That's cultivating safety from the inside out. You cannot have a comprehensive school safety program without both. You have external safety measures and you have internal safety measures. You have to have both. It's the #1 way to improve school climate and culture. It's also the #1 most proactive and preventative mental health initiative we have. We know social emotional learning proactively reduces and prevents mental illness of all kinds. That doesn't mean, well, it does address the symptoms too, but that means stopping the suffering before it even starts. And it's also the #1 skills that future employers value most. So we're all connected by the want and need to love and be loved. We're all the same in that. And when I speak to kids, I say, I'm not talking to you as an adult to a child. I'm talking to you as a human being to another human being. Because in some ways, we're all the same. And the things that the kids struggle with in the classrooms, we're still struggling with them as adults. Maybe in slightly different ways, but not much. We're all the same. And bottom line, as human beings, we're all the same in the want and need to love and be loved. It's what connects us all. And love is connection, by the way. Love is connection. And I learned this through little kids when I'm talking to them, like little kids that just blurt out the truth and they're not embarrassed by what they say. I'll say, what does anger sound like? And they'll go, blah, headache, inferno, fire, stomach ache. That's anger. Then I'll say, what does love look like? And immediately, without thinking, and they're not necessarily sitting next to their best friend, they go. Or if they're sitting across from tables, they'll do this. Try to touch, right? I learned from that love is connection. And we all need connection. In fact, we know we die without connection. And it doesn't matter how old we are. We have the same need for connection. Harvard University did a 75-year longitudinal study. They wanted to find out the secret to happiness. This is another thing that we're all the same in. We all just want to be happy. Doesn't matter how old we are. And they did a 75-year longitudinal study, which means that for 75 years, they took different data points and different people, obviously, but the same survey, and they came up with the exact same results. The secret to happiness is healthy connections, positive relationships. The secret to happiness. Guess what? We're not born with the skills and tools to have healthy relationships and positive connections. Interesting enough, that's called social emotional learning. We have to learn them. Not hard to teach or hard to learn, but we have to learn them. And by the way, if you didn't learn them and you didn't have a fantastic role model, you don't necessarily have them right now. I was at a school counseling conference over last summer, and our keynote speaker was an FBI director of drug enforcement. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So over lunch, we're listening to him talk, and he's saying, I'm here because we're losing the war on drugs. He says, we've realized now we can't arrest our way out of the situation. We have more people dying all around us. We're constantly scrambling to keep up with these new additive agents. He talked about one of his officers going to an overdose site, and one of his officers got a drop of fentanyl, which is a mixing agent, on his uniform. He took his bare hand, this officer, to brush off the fentanyl. He overdosed through the skin within minutes, and it took 3 doses of Narcan to bring him back. He said, that's the kind of stuff that we're dealing with now. And every time we figure out what the chemical composition is of one thing, they just change it slightly, and they're always ahead of us. And he said, so I'm basically here to reach out to you for help. And I was like, oh my God, you're the FBI and that's the best you got? Ugh. But then his counterpart got up and said something that blew me away, started talking my language. She said, the opposite of addiction is connection, and connection is love. That's what we're talking about here. Social emotional learning teaches us how to connect. Bottom line, connection, secret to happiness, right? The opposite of addiction. It's so incredibly powerful. It's what it's all about. There's no more important conversation, by the way, that we could be having than the one that we're having right now, because it all leads to safety. I think you ask parents, what do you want for your kids? And they go, oh, well, I want them to do well in school. I want them to get good grades and test scores. I want them to graduate. I want them to go to college. I want them to do well there. I want them to graduate. I want them to get a good job. I want them to marry someone nice and have a beautiful family and have a happy life. And I go, wait a minute, you forgot something. You want them to be safe, right? And all of those things that I just described, the best way to ensure that that happens is making sure that they have social and emotional learning. So I worked with educators to develop a program that we feel transcends all the obstacles of getting social emotional learning into a school. And it better, since that's my goal, my life's goal, is to make sure every child has some sort of comprehensive social emotional learning program. We call ours the Choose Love Enrichment Program. It's the only program written by educators for educators. I didn't write it. Educators in certain classrooms wrote it. We included the best of what was statistically effective and being taught in classrooms today. Not just social emotional learning, but positive psychology, mindfulness, growth mindset, neuroscience, emotional intelligence, character education, and it's all built on post-traumatic growth research. I'm pretty sure we're the only ones that has that because nobody's ever heard of it. We made it easy to teach, easy to learn, flexible, takes very little time, being very, very mindful of the time constraints that you all have as educators. And there's no training required because the educator learns right alongside the student through the lessons. Meaning that, and my favorite feedback has been over the past year and a half, because it's only been launched a year and a half ago, that the educators are receiving as much benefit as the students, saying they're learning the skills and tools, bringing them home, using them with their kids, and I love that. And we made it a lot of fun. Oh, and we have people, individuals really, that believe so strongly in what we're doing that that is not only in the best interest of every individual child, but our society and the future of our society, that they are willing to fund this to provide it to schools at no cost. Everything that we do is at no cost. We also have an at-home program, which is social and emotional learning for parents, skills and tools that correlate to what we're being taught in the classroom, same languaging, so everybody can be on the same page, parent, child, and educator. So we're now being taught in all 50 states and over 55 countries. Interestingly enough, this is spreading by word of mouth. We don't advertise. And it's really my mouth, and you know I have a big mouth, but also the mouths of the educators that are teaching it and seeing such incredible results. This is a classroom that's taught under a tree in Malawi. They are choosing love. But it's being taught in posh, private, charter, public, home schools all across the country. It's very flexible, and I think the key to the flexibility is that it's built on love, which is what unites us all as human beings, the want and need. So here's this, the foundational aspect of the program, and this is a skill and tool that I want you all to walk away with today, to be able to use in your life. It's how I live my life based on this formula for choosing love. And this is a formula that can lead you to choosing love in any situation or circumstance in your life. I've been spreading it for 5 years. No one has ever said, excuse me, I have something that's going on that I can't be led to love with the formula. It's based on Jesse's chalkboard message of nurturing, healing, love, as well as his example of courage. So it starts with courage because everything starts with courage, by the way. At its very base, everything starts with courage. And it's the same courage that our kids are struggling with. It's the courage to do the right thing, courage to tell the truth, courage to put our best foot forward, courage to step outside of our own selves and help someone else. That's true courage. And courage is a muscle. We have to practice it. Nurturing means loving kindness and gratitude. Healing literally means forgiveness, and love is compassion in action. When you have the courage to practice those 3 character values in that order, and by the way, that's neuroscientifically accurate, which I'm pretty sure Jesse didn't know, you are choosing love. So my mom calls it like a rope that you put down, place down to yourself in any depth of well, whatever situation you're in. It takes courage to want to pull yourself out of that place, right? To even look up. And your first handhold would be gratitude. Thinking of something to be grateful for. And by the way, I can tell you, there is always something to be grateful for. And you know those 50,000 thoughts that go through your head on a daily basis? They go through one at a time. Physically impossible to have 2 thoughts at once. You know what the great thing about that is? Gratitude can be the great mind shifter. You're having a lower energy, depressed, angry thought. You cannot have that thought and a grateful thought at the same time. Physically impossible. Pretty cool, right? Then you have that handhold, your next handhold, and that actually literally strengthens you to consider forgiveness for yourself or someone else. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And then you look outside of your own situation in pain, and you help someone else, and you turn around, and all of a sudden, you're out of the hole. That's how that works. So this is the actual message of nurturing, healing, love. I knew when I saw that, by the way, and Jesse wrote this obviously shortly before he died. I found it shortly after. I knew that if Adam Lanza, who's the shooter in our case, was able to give and receive nurturing, healing love, the tragedy would never have happened. And that's when I knew I would have to spread this message for the rest of my life. I knew I had to get it in schools. And I was introduced to a doctoral professor at Western Connecticut State University. He's the director of the Compassion, Creativity, and Innovation Center there, and he's the author of The Compassionate Achiever. He told me, well, it's called social emotional learning. That's how you do it. And that's when my journey started. So let's just go through the formula, and then we'll wrap it up, because I really want you to have this as a skill and tool. It's really helped me, and it's helped people. It's actually transformed and saved lives, student lives, educator lives all over the world. Let's talk about courage. Courage is the willingness and ability to walk through obstacles despite feeling embarrassment, fear, reluctance, or uncertainty. I talk about Jesse's courage when he saved 9 of his classmates' lives, because that's the same courage that we all have within us. He was a 6-year-old little boy. We all have that courage. But we just have to be aware of it, and we have to practice it. And it takes a tremendous amount of courage to lead our lives in a happy, fulfilled way. But we have so much more control over that than we ever imagined. Aristotle said courage is the first of human qualities because it is the quality which guarantees all the others. Let's talk about, I'll share a quick story. I'm on a plane the other day because I'm flying around, and I'm going, it's a Pacific Ocean crossing overnight, so the longest ocean crossing, so ostensibly the most dangerous flight you can have. And we're about ready to take off, and I'm at the window seat, and I look out, and there's a cable lying on the wing of the plane. It's like a black cable that thick, that long, laying on the wing of the plane, so that one of the flaps was hanging down. I'm like, oh my God, we can't take off like that. I'm like, somebody will say something. Somebody's going to say something. I'm not the only person on the window, and I'm not the only person seeing this. So the stewardesses will make a final pass and take, and they did, and I'm waiting for somebody to say, they're belting themselves in. We've backed out. We're going down towards the runway, and I'm like, I cannot believe. Excuse me, I'm so sorry, God. There is something that's wrong with the wing, and so you're going to have, please, can you, the stewardess, she comes up, she looks out, she goes, you're right, that's not right. I'm going to call the pilot. She goes, the plane stops right, as we're going to take off. The pilot comes back annoyed, and he looks out, he turns around without saying anything. And then you hear, ladies and gentlemen, somebody saw something. It's probably nothing, but your safety is our main concern, so we have to turn around. I'm sorry for all of those that have connections, that you might miss them now. And I'm like, oh my God. So we turned around, we go back in, the little guys with the thing, the stairs come up, and they're looking at this guy. I know they have no idea what it is. And so nobody's saying anything, right? And then maybe 10 minutes later, the stewardess and the pilot come back and say, who raised their hand? And I was like, I did. And they said, thank you very much. The stewardess said, it's actually my birthday today, and I wanted to see another birthday. And then something interesting happened. People along the window seats started standing up and turning around saying, oh my God, thank God you said something. We didn't have the courage to say anything. I'm always learning, and I'm going, wow. So you were going to let the plane take off on an overnight flight that might have killed you, but because you were embarrassed, you didn't want to say anything, you weren't going to say anything. Then I thought about myself. With everything that I've been through, and I go around and I talk about courage, it took until we were almost taking off for me to say something. Courage is something that we really have to cultivate within ourselves. It could save our life, right? Gratitude, mindful thankfulness, and the ability to be thankful even when things in life are challenging. I'm at 100% free and reduced lunch school the other day in Connecticut. These kids don't eat at home. They actually send them home with backpacks with food in them. And I'm looking over the second grader's shoulder. They're choosing love in their classroom. They're working on their gratitude list. And I'm looking over his shoulder, and I'm reading his gratitude list. I snap this to send it to my team. Number 1, I'm grateful for having a house when I'm not with my parents and for having foster parents. Number 2, I'm thankful to eat every day. And I sent this with a note to my team. I said, no one would blame this kid for being angry and belligerent. Clearly he has things going on, but he's focusing on what he has. He's going to be okay. Look at the benefit. These are all scientific benefits of being grateful. And look what they all lead to. Greater happiness. Gratitude, the great mind shifter, so vitally important. It actually elongates your life. You know that something that elongates your life has to be really powerful. Let's talk about forgiveness for a minute. I've gotten a lot of attention because I've been very public about forgiving Adam Lanza. I learned a lot about his life. And I learned that actually he did everything that a little boy was supposed to do. He kept up his end of the bargain. Everything. When he was in 5th grade, he wrote a book. He called it a book, but it was actually like a little thesis, or it was a story. And he hand-wrote copies, and he brought it to school to sell. It was called The Book of Granny. And in this book, a witch comes to the school with a broomstick. And the broomstick opens into a semi-automatic weapon, and she murders children. So, like these are red flags that he was waving. And there were many of them. At school, at home, in the community, and he was never noticed. Never noticed. And so, kids don't go, excuse me, I'm having thoughts of self-harm and harming others. Can you please make an appointment at a psychiatrist at your earliest convenience? They rarely do that, but they do give you signs. And so in that way, it's actually easier for me to be angry for him than angry at him. And I forgave him. And we know through science, because there's so much science behind the benefits of forgiveness, by the way, that forgiveness is the key to resilience. We all talk about that buzzword, resilience. We want our kids to have it. We want to be it. Forgiveness is the way to it. And also, by the way, forgiveness is the #1 way to have healthy relationships. Where have I heard that before? Oh yeah, Harvard University, 75-year longitudinal study. What's the key to happiness? Positive relationships. What's the key to positive relationships? Forgiveness. People in the beginning said, oh, forgiveness? You're going to be teaching kids forgiveness? Don't you think that's kind of lofty for them? And you know what I found? It's lofty for us, not for them. When I was in California talking to a whole school, kindergarten through 5th grade, and I'm talking about the formula, then I'm like, okay, last 10 minutes, you're going to get up and you're going to share which of the character values you practice on a daily basis. And I'm thinking they're going to go, I'm courageous, or I help my friends when they fall, or whatever. The majority of them, 9 out of 10, got up and talked about forgiveness. So kids get this. Forgiveness, forget about what the definition is. My new and improved definition, taking back your personal power. It's the only way to do that in some circumstances. By forgiveness. Doesn't mean, we say forgive and forget. It doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean condoning. It doesn't even mean that you can't hold the person who did something to you accountable. We're all responsible for what we do and what we don't do, that we should do, right? Forgiveness is simply cutting the cord that attaches you to pain. It would seem almost insane, wouldn't it, if I allowed the man, the troubled young man that murdered my son, to then ruin my life, to have control, because we give it, over my thoughts, which impact my feelings, which then impact my behavior. No, the only way I take my personal power back is through my set of scissors, cutting the cord that attaches me to pain. But it doesn't mean that I don't get angry. It doesn't mean that I don't suffer still. And it doesn't mean when I get angry that I failed in my forgiveness. It simply means that I have to take a step back, take a deep breath, and forgive again. Because forgiveness starts with a thought, a choice, and then it becomes a process. So vitally important. The key to happiness. if you knew everyone's pain, if you knew everyone's story, you would love them. You can't really hate anyone if you know everything that happened to them between their birth and now, why they became the way they became, why they have walls up or down. If you truly know someone, you'd get it. Last character value, compassion in action. Compassion in action. A lot of times we talk about empathy as compassion. Did anybody feel empathy for me today when you watched the video? How did that feel? Sad? Painful? You know what? Empathy lights up the same receptors in your brain as physical pain. Empathy is painful. Have you heard of compassion burnout? That's wrong. It's empathy burnout. We can only feel somebody else's pain for so long. That's why we focus on the action component, right? There has to be two components. There's the identifying, but then there's the action. And when you actively do something to help ease another's pain, that's when everything comes back to you. And the best, I'm going to quickly go through the story because it's actually in your book. JT was 12 years old when his little brother died. You'll read about this. But he had an incredible experience where orphan genocide survivors reached out, shared their story, led him through his healing, and he started his own organization called Newtown Helps Rwanda that he's actually in D.C. right now promoting with politicians and the media. And he reached back out to those guys from Rwanda and started raising money to send them to university. 5 years later, JT is doing better than he ever has before. And it's so incredible, and I learned so much about compassion in action and the healing power it has for us. When we do for others, we're doing even more for ourselves. And guess what? There's so much research. I don't have the research. So much research behind that shows us there's a 22% reduction in mortality when you do for others. Whoa. Right? So does the Choose Love formula work for everyone in every circumstance? JT and I went to, we were asked to donate my book to a prison, speak to convicted felons. I didn't think any convicted felon would read a book called Nurturing Healing Love, but I didn't mind donating it. So I dragged JT up there with me because he had the day off. He doesn't look thrilled, and he wasn't. But we had an incredible meeting with them, and I'll let them talk just in a short clip about what it meant to them.
Love instead of revenge.
It amazed me in the discussion we had how many people, just because of your story and your message, were rethinking the behaviors they've done. And not just rethinking the behaviors they've done, but literally coming up and saying, maybe I'm not going to behave this way going forward. And I thought that was one of the most powerful things because some of us in here have legitimate street credentials.
Gang members.
These are people who you maybe saved lives, literally multiple lives. And I think just your message and you coming here, before you got here, you had done that. Now with you being here, we're all rethinking something in our lives. And I want to thank you for that as well.
You guys are my Choose Love movement ambassadors, if you want to be. Seriously, you know? I mean, that's what I want. That's my goal.
So you guys all know the starfish story? The little boy, the tide's gone out, and he's walking along the beach, and he's picking up single starfish and throwing them back into the water. And an older man comes down from the other side. He goes, "What are you doing?" And the little boy says, "Oh, I'm saving these starfish." And the old man says, "I just came from the other way. There are tens of thousands of starfish on this beach. There's no way that all of your efforts could make a difference." The little boy bent down, picked up another starfish, threw that back into the water and said, "It made a difference to that one." And that's what you guys do every single day with your students and your little starfish. You make a huge difference. Jesse left one last message for his big brother. It was a little note folded up on his desk that he found after he died, and it said, "Have a lot of fun." Now, this was a profound message from a little brother to a big brother, but it's also for us. What are the two most important things that we do on a daily basis? Choosing love in all of our choices is the basis for all of our choices, because we're either choosing love or choosing fear, and the outcomes look vastly different, and having a lot of fun. I want to have a lot of fun. Your students want to have a lot of fun. Your kids, you guys want to have a lot of fun. So I want this to be a reminder to you, because sometimes it is a choice, believe it or not. And I want to invite you to join the movement to choose love. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And right before I go, I want to give a great example of what choosing love is. And my new friend, Duke, is sitting at that table. He is a veteran, so thank you very much for your service. But he was my Uber driver that picked me up at the airport. And he said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, this is why I'm here." And got out, gave him a book. And then I got up to my hotel room and I look, and it's like, Uber has corrected your fare. And it was refunded to me. And I wrote him and I said, "Did you refund my fare?" And he said, "I did. It was the least I could do. And I am available to drive you anywhere you want to go at no charge while you're here." And I said, probably much to his chagrin, "Well, I have a 6 a.m. flight on Sunday, but I totally understand if that's too early." And he said, "Nope, I will be there." So, and he came to hear me speak. And so that is I'll give him a round of applause and thank him for his service and his example of choosing love. Sorry to embarrass you, Duke, but I'm so happy to see you. Another friend for me in Reno. And so thank you very much. Thank you for choosing love. And there's my personal email there if you have a question or comment. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.